The crystalline spires of the Centaurian embassy glittered against Earth's atmosphere as Lyra Varlin stared down at the blue planet below. Her iridescent scales shifted from deep purple to midnight blue, a clear sign of her displeasure, though the humans wouldn't know enough about her species to recognize it. "Ambassador Volan, your presence is requested in the briefing chamber," the station's AI announced, its voice carefully modulated to avoid irritating Centaurian auditory sensitivities. At least they'd gotten that right. Lyra straightened her ceremonial robes, the fabric shimming with embedded quantum threads that marked her status as one of the Centaurian Science Council's most respected xenobiologists. "Inform them I'll arrive when protocol dictates," she responded, allowing a hint of frost to enter her tone. The truth was, she'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy than this orbital station. Humans were, in her professional opinion, barely more than clever primates who had stumbled their way into space travel. Their cities were chaotic, their technology crude, and their social structures hopelessly primitive. Yet here she was, assigned to oversee their first deep space research initiative. The briefing chamber was already full when she arrived, exactly on time by Centaurian standards, which meant 10 minutes late by human ones. She noted the irritated glances from the Earth representatives with clinical detachment. "Ambassador Volan," Director Sarah Morrison stepped forward, her forced smile doing little to mask her annoyance. "We're honored you could join us." Dr. Chen was just explaining the breakthrough in quantum entanglement that made this project possible. Laura's attention shifted to the man at the holoscreen. Dr. Marcus Chen stood with the quiet confidence she'd come to recognize as characteristic of Earth's leading scientists, though she'd never admit to recognizing anything positive about humans. His dark eyes met hers without flinching, something few species dared to do with a Centaurian. "As I was saying," he continued, "by reversing the polarity of the quantum field at precisely calculated intervals, we've managed to stabilize the wormhole aperture for up to 72 Earth hours." His hands moved through the holographic display, manipulating complex equations with practiced ease. Despite herself, Laura felt a flicker of interest. The mathematics were sound, if inelegant by Centaurian standards. "And you achieved this without access to crystal computing?" she asked, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice. "Sometimes a hammer works better than a laser scalpel, Ambassador." Chen's response carried a hint of amusement that made her scales ripple with annoyance. "We find that traditional binary computing, combined with our quantum processors, offers flexibility that pure crystal systems lack." "Fascinating," Lyra replied, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "And how do you propose to prevent cascade failures in the containment field? Surely your hammer isn't precise enough for that." Chen's smile widened. "Actually, we've developed a new approach. Would you care to review the data?" Over the next hour, Laura found herself drawn into an increasingly detailed technical discussion. The human solution was unconventional, borderline dangerous by Centaurian standards, but it worked. They had achieved stable wormhole generation with technology that should have been centuries beyond their capability. "Your concerns about safety are valid," Chen concluded, "which is why we're requesting Centaurian oversight. Your experience with similar technology could help us refine our methods." "You mean prevent you from accidentally creating a black hole in Earth's orbit," Lara corrected. That too. He didn't deny it, which surprised her. Most humans she'd encountered tried to mask their limitations. Director Morrison cleared her throat. "Then we're agreed. Ambassador Verlin will join the research team as Chief Safety Officer." Laura's scales shifted through several shades of blue as she considered. Working directly with humans was the last thing she wanted, but the alternative was potentially watching them tear a hole in spacetime. "Agreed," she said finally, "though I have conditions." "Of course you do," Chen murmured, just loud enough for her enhanced hearing to catch it. She shot him a sharp look. "All experimental protocols will be submitted for my review. Any deviation will result in immediate shutdown." And Dr. Chen, she added, letting her inner eyelids close briefly, You will explain exactly how you achieved quantum stability with such primitive tools. Looking forward to working with you too, Ambassador. His response carried that same hint of amusement that set her scales on edge. As the meeting dispersed, Lyra remained behind, studying the equations still floating in the holographic display. She would never admit it aloud, but there was an elegant simplicity to the human solution. Perhaps that was what disturbed her most, the suggestion that her species' technological superiority might not be as absolute as she'd always believed. "Computer," she commanded, "download all project data to my personal database. Flag any deviations from standard Centaurian protocols." As the data streamed into her neural interface, Lyra allowed herself a moment of unprofessional honesty. This assignment might not be the diplomatic dead end she'd initially assumed. At the very least, watching humans fumble with forces beyond their comprehension should prove entertaining. She had no way of knowing that within 6 months, everything she thought she knew about humans, and herself, would be turned upside down. Professional friction. 3 months into the Deep Space Initiative, Laura found herself spending far more time in the human laboratories than her diplomatic status required. She told herself it was purely professional concern. Someone had to prevent these primitives from destroying themselves. But even she couldn't deny a growing fascination with their methods. "That's completely unorthodox," she declared, watching Dr. Chen jury-rig a quantum stabilizer using what appeared to be spare parts and determination. Her scales flickered between deep purple and teal, betraying her mixed feelings of horror and intrigue. "Unorthodox is my specialty," Marcus replied, not looking up from his work. His hands moved with practiced precision, connecting circuits that by all rights shouldn't be compatible. "Sometimes the best solutions aren't in any manual." "There are manuals for a reason," Lyra countered, but moved closer to observe. "Your species' tendency to improvise is precisely why the Council considers you dangerous." Dangerous. Now he did look up, dark eyes meeting hers with that unsettling directness, or just unpredictable. Before she could respond, the stabilizer hummed to life, its energy readings perfectly aligned with Centaurian specifications. Lyra's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, the equivalent of a human blink of surprise. "How did you," she began, then caught herself. "A fortunate accident." "Keep telling yourself that, Ambassador." Marcus's smile held no mockery, only genuine warmth that made something flutter in her secondary cardiac chamber. She quickly suppressed the reaction. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion from the medical bay. Dr. Sarah Morrison burst into the lab, her usual composure shattered. "Marcus, we need you. It's happening again." Lyra followed them without invitation, her diplomatic status giving her access to all station areas. In the medical bay, a Proximan researcher arrived on an examination table, their crystalline skin clouded with illness. "Third case this week," Sarah reported grimly. "Same symptoms: cellular degradation, neural disruption. Our treatments aren't working." Marcus was already moving, pulling up holographic displays of medical data. "Show me the pattern analysis." Lyra stepped forward, her own neural interface connecting with the station's medical database. "This is impossible. Proximans don't get sick. Their crystalline structure is breaking down at the quantum level," Marcus finished. He manipulated the display, zooming in on cellular scans. "Look at this pattern. It's almost like the quantum field disruptions in the wormhole experiments." Lyra finished, her scientific training overriding her usual restraint. Their eyes met across the hologram, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. "We need to shut down the experiments," she declared, already reaching for her emergency protocols. "Wait." Marcus's hand caught her wrist. The contact sent an unexpected shock through her system, making her scales ripple with colors she hadn't displayed since adolescence. He quickly withdrew his hand, but his expression remained intense. "If we shut down now, we lose all our data. There might be a way to reverse the effects. And risk more contamination. The Council would never." The council isn't here, he interrupted. We are, and we might be the only ones who can solve this. Lyra found herself torn between centuries of protocol and the undeniable logic of his argument. More than that, she was torn between her duty as a Centaurian diplomat and her calling as a scientist. 12 hours, she said finally. After that, I implement emergency shutdown regardless of results. Marcus nodded, already turning back to his work. Sarah, get me everything we have on quantum cellular interfaces. Ambassador, I could use your expertise in proximal biology. They worked through the station's night cycle, their previous friction transforming into seamless collaboration. Lyra found herself repeatedly surprised by Marcus's intuitive leaps, the way he connected concepts that should have been incompatible. More disturbing was how natural it felt to work beside him, their different approaches complementing rather than conflicting. There, she announced, just as their deadline approached. The quantum field isn't causing the illness, it's accelerating something that was already present, some kind of engineered virus. Marcus swore softly in Mandarin. Sabotage. Perhaps. Lyra's scales had shifted to deep crimson, a color of intense concentration. But why target only non-human personnel? Their eyes met again, and this time Mather looked away. Someone wants the project shut down, Marcus said slowly. Someone who doesn't want humans pushing into deep space. Or someone who doesn't want humans working with other species, Lyra added. She found herself standing closer to him than protocol allowed, close enough to catch his distinctly human scent. It should have repelled her. It didn't. We need to take this to Morrison, Marcus said, his voice oddly rough. But first, we need to synthesize a cure. Lyra nodded, already calculating equations. Combine traditional human antivirals with quantum field manipulation. Using the same principles as the stabilizer, Marcus finished. Unorthodox, but sometimes unorthodox works, she admitted, surprising them both. As they bent over their work, Lyra realized something had shifted between them, something as fundamental as quantum physics and as unpredictable as human nature. She told herself it was merely professional respect, nothing more. She almost believed it. Crisis point. The cure worked, but the saboteur's identity remained elusive. Over the next few weeks, security protocols tightened, and suspicion spread through the station like a virus of its own. Yet amid the mounting tensions, Lyra found herself spending even more time in the human laboratories, particularly during Marcus's shifts. Your calculations are wrong again, she announced one evening, her scales shifting to a smug azure as she reviewed his work. The quantum variance needs to account for gravitational. The station lurched violently, throwing her against Marcus. His arms instinctively caught her, and for a moment, they stayed frozen, her iridescent scales flickering through colors she hadn't displayed since her first metamorphosis. Emergency alarms shattered the moment. Multiple containment failures in the wormhole chamber, the AI announced, its usual smooth tones replaced by urgent staccato. Quantum cascade imminent. All personnel evacuate immediately. Marcus was already moving, his hands flying over control panels. The failsafes aren't responding. If that cascade reaches the reactor, the station will collapse into a temporary singularity, Lyra finished, her scientific training overriding her diplomatic reserve, taking half of Earth's orbital installations with it. Their eyes met across the chaos of warning lights and emergency protocols. I have an idea, Marcus said, in that tone she'd learned, meant he was about to suggest something brilliantly stupid. But you're going to hate it. I already hate it, she replied, but moved to his side anyway. Tell me. We can't stop the cascade, but we might be able to redirect it. His hands never stopped moving, reconfiguring systems that were never meant to be connected. If we channel the quantum surge through the station's shield generators. Absolutely not, Lyra cut him off. The energy conversion alone would create a controlled quantum bubble, he finished, containing the collapse long enough for emergency protocols to engage. It's never been done, she protested, even as her own hands joined his at the controls, her neural interface connecting directly with the station's systems. The Council specifically classified such attempts as too dangerous to. The Council isn't here, Marcus reminded her, echoing their earlier conversation, and we're out of options. He was right, damn him. They had menos than 5 minutes before the cascade reached critical mass. Following standard protocols would mean evacuating, watching the station destroy itself, and potentially triggering a disaster that would set human-alien relations back centuries. If we survive this, she said, her scales now pulsing with deep crimson determination, I'm filing an official protest about human disregard for safety procedures. Marcus's laugh was strained but genuine. Noted, Ambassador. Now, on my mark. What followed was either the most reckless or most brilliant feat of quantum engineering in known space. They worked in perfect synchronization, human intuition and Centaurian precision combining in ways that should have been impossible. As the cascade reached its peak, they diverted its energy through systems that were never meant to connect, creating a temporary pocket of altered spacetime around the failing containment chamber. It's working, Lyra announced, her neural interface streaming data faster than any human could process. The bubble is stable, but we need to be inside it to maintain the field, Marcus finished grimly. Go. I can handle it from here. Don't be absurd, she snapped, her scales flaring with colors that would have shocked her diplomatic colleagues. The neural load would kill a human instantly. Better one than everyone on the station. Better none at all. Before he could argue, she interfaced directly with his console, her neural networks extending to encompass his systems. Together, the load might be survivable if we share it. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met. Then the cascade hit. Pain exploded through Lyra's neural pathways as raw quantum energy poured through their makeshift containment field. She felt Marcus's consciousness brush against hers through the interface, distinctly alien yet somehow familiar. Together, they held the bubble, forcing order onto chaos through sheer determination. Seconds stretched into eternities. Through their shared connection, Lyra felt Marcus's mind beginning to fade under the strain. Without conscious thought, she extended her own neural protection to encompass him, taking more of the load herself. His gratitude and concern flowed back through their link, along with something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. Finally, after what seemed like hours, but was probably only minutes, the emergency systems caught up with their improvisation. The cascade collapsed in on itself, safely contained within their quantum bubble. They broke the neural connections simultaneously, both gasping from the aftermath. Lyra's scales were cycling through colors so rapidly she looked like a malfunctioning hologram. Marcus was pale but steady, looking at her with an expression that made her secondary heart skip several beats. That, she said, trying to regain her diplomatic composure, was the most irresponsible, dangerous, completely unorthodox. Brilliant, he suggested, still breathing hard. I was going to say effective. She straightened her robes, ignoring the way her scales betrayed her inner turmoil. Though the Council will never believe it was possible. Then don't tell them, Marcus said simply. Tell them we followed standard containment protocols. After all, the result is what matters, right? Lyra opened her mouth to deliver a lecture on proper documentation, then closed it again. He was right again. And that moment of shared consciousness had shown her things about humans, about this human in particular, that she couldn't ignore. The quantum bubble creation data stays between us, she said finally. But next time, we design proper safety protocols first. Next time? His smile made her scales ripple in ways that had nothing to do with the residual quantum energy. Ambassador Volin, did you just suggest we break more laws of physics together? Purely in the interests of science, she replied with all the dignity she could muster. But as emergency teams finally reached their position, she found herself fighting an entirely undiplomatic urge to smile back. Unexpected development. 2 months after the quantum cascade incident, Lara knew something was wrong. Her scales had been shifting through pastel hues without her control, colors associated with Centaurian metamorphosis, impossible for an adult of her species. The station's medical eye had no explanation. Neither did her private consultations with Centaurian physicians. She was in the middle of reviewing quantum stability reports when the first wave of nausea hit. Her scales flashed brilliant white, a color of pure shock, as her diagnostic implants registered impossible readings. Ambassador. Marcus looked up from his workstation, concern evident in his voice. Your colors. I'm fine, she snapped, but her body betrayed her. The room spun, and suddenly Marcus was beside her, supporting her as her legs gave way. Medical bay. Now. His tone left no room for argument, not that she had the strength for one. The human doctor, Dr. Sarah Morrison, ran every test in her considerable arsenal, then ran them again. Her expression grew increasingly bewildered with each result. This is impossible, she muttered, staring at the readings. The cellular structure, the quantum resonance. I need to consult with. You will consult with no one, Lara commanded, her diplomatic authority cutting through her physical discomfort. Doctor-patient confidentiality protocols are in effect. Lyra, Marcus said softly. When had he started using her first name? Whatever this is, we need to understand it. After the cascade, she interrupted, when our neural networks merged, her scales shifted to a deep violet of realization, the quantum bubble. Sarah's eyes widened as she processed the implications. The energy transfer. It must have altered your cellular structure at the quantum level, and when you connected with Marcus. Impossible, Lyra whispered, but her own diagnostic systems were confirming it. Cross-species reproduction has never. You're pregnant, Sarah stated flatly. With what appears to be a human-Centaurian hybrid, the first in recorded history. The medical bay fell silent except for the soft hum of diagnostic equipment. Laura's scales cycled through colors so rapidly they became a blur, reflecting the chaos of her thoughts. She turned to Marcus, who stood frozen, his expression unreadable. This cannot happen, she said, her diplomatic training asserting itself. The council will never accept. They'll demand immediate termination. The political implications alone. No, Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. He moved closer, not quite touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his human body. This is more than politics. This is a miracle, Sarah finished, still studying the readings. Do you realize what this means? The quantum cascade didn't just allow cross-species reproduction. It proved that at a fundamental level, our species are compatible. The implications for xenobiology are irrelevant. Lyra cut her off. This cannot become public knowledge. My career, my position. To hell with your position, Marcus said, with such intensity that both women stared at him. This is our child we're talking about. A child that shouldn't be possible but is. And if you think I'm going to let anyone, the council, EarthGov, anyone, harm either of you. Lyra's scales shifted to a soft rose color, a shade of vulnerability she hadn't displayed since childhood. You would support this. Support it? He laughed, though there was an edge of hysteria to it. Lyra, do you have any idea how many nights I've spent trying to figure out how to tell you, how to explain? That you harbor inappropriate feelings for a superior species, she suggested, but there was no bite to her words. That I've fallen in love with the most brilliant, infuriating, beautiful being I've ever met, he corrected. Species be damned. Sarah cleared her throat. I'll give you two a moment, but we need to discuss medical protocols. This pregnancy will be unique. After she left, silence fell again. Laura's hands drifted to her midsection, where her diagnostic implants were detecting the impossible, a life that combined human and Centaurian DNA, stabilized by the same quantum principles that had saved the station. The council will recall me immediately if they learn of this, she said finally. Then we don't tell them. Marcus moved closer, slowly enough to give her time to withdraw. She didn't. We have allies here. Sarah will help. Director Morrison too, if we explain. And when I begin displaying obvious signs, when the child is born, her scales flickered between anxiety and a strange growing hope. We'll figure it out. His hand found hers, warm human fingers intertwining with her iridescent ones. Together, like we did with the quantum bubble. That was different, she protested. That was science. This is science too, he pointed out. The most amazing scientific breakthrough in history. And his voice softened, maybe something more. Laura looked down at their joined hands, so different yet fitting together perfectly. Like the quantum equations they'd solved together. Like the impossible child growing within her. The council will never accept this, she said again, but her scales were shifting to colors of dawn, hope, renewal, beginning. Then we'll make them accept it, Marcus replied with that uniquely human determination that had first drawn her to him. We'll prove that our differences make us stronger, not weaker. That love transcends biology. Love. Her inner eyelids flickered rapidly. That's a very human concept. Maybe it's time Centaurians learned about it then. As if in response, her diagnostic implants registered a tiny quantum fluctuation from the life growing within her, a perfect blend of human chaos and Centaurian precision. Perhaps, she thought, that was what love was. Not weakness, but a new kind of strength. Her scales settled into a color she'd never displayed before, a shimmering gold that seemed to glow from within. Perhaps, she said softly, it's time we both learned something new. Cultural collision. The Centaurian High Council's holographic projections filled the station's conference room, their crystalline forms radiating disapproval. Laura stood before them, her ceremonial robes carefully arranged to hide the subtle changes in her body. Her scales maintained a rigid diplomatic blue, though the effort of controlling them was becoming increasingly difficult. Ambassador Volin, first speaker Kalar's voice resonated with authority. Explain these anomalous readings in your latest medical report. A side effect of prolonged exposure to human quantum technology, Lyra replied smoothly. The lie tasted bitter, but she had practiced it extensively. Dr. Chen and I are studying the phenomenon. Dr. Chen, another council member, said the human name like it was a disease. We have reports of excessive collaboration between you and this scientist. Before Lyra could respond, the conference room door slid open. Marcus strode in, ignoring the scandalized ripple that passed through the council's projections. Forgive the interruption, he said, though his tone held no apology. But we have a situation in the quantum lab that requires the ambassador's immediate attention. This is a closed session, Kalar began, but Marcus cut him off. This is a human station, he said firmly, and station safety protocols supersede diplomatic courtesy. Lyra felt a flutter in her secondary heart, partly from anxiety, partly from something else she still hadn't fully accepted. My apologies, Honored Council. We will reconvene. You will remain, Kalar commanded. These readings suggest genetic instability. If you have been compromised by human technology, protocols dictate immediate quarantine and return to Centaurid Prime for purification. The word purification sent ice through Lyra's veins. Her scales betrayed her for a fraction of a second, flickering to terrified white before she regained control. Marcus stepped forward, deliberately placing himself between Lyra and the Council's projections. Ambassador Volin's presence is essential to the station's safety. Any attempt to remove her would violate our treaty. Know your place, human, another council member sneered. This is an internal Centaurian matter. No, Lyra said quietly. Every head turned toward her. It's not. Her scales shifted, deliberately this time, to the shimmering gold that only appeared when the child within her moved. I am carrying a child, she announced, her voice steady despite the gasps from the council. A human-Centaurian hybrid, made possible by the quantum cascade event. The silence that followed was absolute. Then chaos erupted. Abomination. Genetic corruption. This cannot be allowed. Marcus's hand found hers, warm and steady. She squeezed it, drawing strength. The child is viable, she continued over the outcry. Its DNA shows perfect quantum stability. This isn't corruption, it's evolution. You will return to Centauri Prime immediately, Kalar ordered. This aberration must be terminated before... Before what? Marcus's voice cut through the chamber like a laser. Before you have to acknowledge that your species isn't as superior as you thought. That humans might have something to offer besides primitive technology. How dare you? Kalar began, but new alarms cut him off. Red emergency lights began flashing. Multiple unauthorized ships dropping out of FTL, the station AI announced. Centaurian signatures detected. Lyra's scales went ash-gray. You already sent them, she whispered. This was never a discussion. It is our duty to protect the purity of our species, Kalar said solemnly. You will be remembered as a loyal servant who was unfortunately corrupted. The connection cut off as the station's security protocols engaged. Marcus was already moving, pulling Lyra toward the door. Sarah has a medical shuttle prepped, he said urgently. We need to move now. The station, Lyra protested, but her hands were protectively cradling her midsection. Director Morrison knows. Half the science team too. They'll buy us time. They raced through corridors already filling with emergency response teams. EarthGov has offered asylum. They're very interested in quantum-stable hybrid genetics. A bitter laugh escaped her. Using our child as a bargaining chip. Using our child as proof that cooperation is better than isolation. They reached the medical bay where Sarah waited with a small team of trusted staff. That love is stronger than prejudice. There's that word again, Lyra murmured, but her scales had shifted back to dawn colors despite everything. Quantum readings are off the charts, Sarah reported as they hurried to the shuttle bay. The baby's generating some kind of field. Like the bubble, Marcus realized, it's protecting itself, protecting all of us. Lyra connected to the shuttle's systems with her neural interface, feeling the familiar mix of human and Centaurian technology. Like their child, it was a hybrid, less efficient than pure Centaurian tech, more adaptable than standard human systems. As they prepared for emergency launch, she felt Marcus' arms wrap around her from behind, his hand resting where their impossible child grew. I won't let them hurt you, he promised. Either of you. I know. Her scales rippled with colors that had no name in any language. Because you're human, you do the impossible simply because no one told you it couldn't be done. The shuttle launched into space as Centaurian ships appeared on the horizon. But Lyra wasn't afraid anymore. She had something worth fighting for, a future that neither humans nor Centaurians had imagined possible. A future born of love. Scientific revolution. The Earth Research Facility deep beneath the Pacific Ocean wasn't what Lyra had expected. Instead of the crude technology she'd once scorned, she found an elegant fusion of human ingenuity and alien collaboration. Much like herself, she thought, watching her scales shimmer with pregnancy-induced colors no Centaurian had ever displayed before. The quantum field surrounding the fetus is unlike anything we've ever seen, Dr. Sarah Morrison explained, manipulating the holographic display. She'd risked her career to accompany them, driven by scientific curiosity and loyalty. It's not just stable, it's evolving. Marcus studied the readings, his hand absently finding Lyra's. Like the bubble we created during the cascade, but organic, self-sustaining. More than that, Lyra's neural interface connected with the facility's systems, streaming data directly into her consciousness. The field is rewriting genetic codes at the quantum level, creating something entirely new. They've been in hiding for 2 weeks, protected by Earth's most advanced stealth technology. Above them, Centaurian ships patrolled space, while diplomatic channels burned with accusations and threats. The discovery of her pregnancy had sparked a crisis that threatened decades of interspecies cooperation. "Look at this." Sarah highlighted a section of the genetics scan. "The hybrid DNA isn't just combining human and Centaurian traits, it's optimizing them, creating something greater than the sum of its parts." "A bridge between species," Marcus murmured. "Living proof that we're stronger together than apart." Before Lyra could respond, alarms blared. Director Chen, Marcus's mother and head of the facility, rushed in. "We've been compromised. Centaurian quantum trackers detected the baby's energy signature." Lyra's scales flashed warning colors. "Impossible. The shielding is being bypassed." Director Chen finished grimly. "They're deploying something new, some kind of quantum resonance technology." They've been preparing for this, Marcus realized. They knew it was possible even before I proved them right. Lyra's voice was bitter. "Before I betrayed everything I was taught to believe. Before you showed them what was possible." Marcus turned to her, his expression intense. "Lyra, think about it. Why would they have quantum resonance tech ready? Why are they so afraid of this child?" Understanding dawned, her scales shifting to colors of revelation. "Because it's happened before. They covered it up, purified the bloodlines, but..." She connected deeper with the facility's database, combining human historical records with her own knowledge of Centaurian genetics. "There have been others, throughout history. The Council didn't just fear it might happen. They knew it would," Sarah finished. "The quantum compatibility between our species isn't an accident, it's natural, maybe even inevitable." The facility shook as something massive descended from above. Emergency protocols engaged, blast doors sealing automatically. "We need to get you out," Director Chen began, but Lyra cut her off. "No." Her scales settled into the pure gold of certainty. "No more running." "Lyra," Marcus started, but she squeezed his hand. "Your people have a saying, the truth will set you free." She straightened to her full height, every inch the diplomat she'd been trained to be. It's time the truth came out, all of it. Understanding dawned on Marcus's face. "You're going to broadcast the data. Everything. The genetic analysis, the quantum field readings, the historical evidence." She was already interfacing with the facility's communications array. "And most importantly, this." She placed her hand on her swollen midsection, where their child's quantum field pulsed with pure possibility. The facility's sensors recorded it all, the perfect harmony of human and Centaurian DNA, the self-sustaining quantum matrix that proved such combinations were natural, meant to be. "They'll try to suppress it," Director Chen warned. "Let them try." Marcus's voice held that human determination that had first drawn Lyra to him. "The truth has a way of spreading. Especially when it's being transmitted through every quantum frequency in the sector," Sarah added with a grin, her fingers flying over control panels. "And backed up on every human network we can access." The facility shook again. Above them, Centaurian ships would be preparing for extraction, but they'd be too late. "Transmission complete," the AI announced. Data packets received and redistributed through human, Proximan, and independent alien networks. Lyra felt the child move within her, its quantum field resonating with the very fabric of spacetime. In that moment, she understood what they'd truly created, not just a baby, but a future. A proof that the barriers between species were illusions, that love and science together could bridge any gap. "They're coming," Director Chen announced unnecessarily as heavy footsteps echoed above. "Let them," Lyra said calmly. Her scales were radiant now, displaying colors that told a story of change, of evolution, of hope. "The Council can't suppress the truth anymore, especially not with an entire planet of humans eager to prove them wrong." Marcus laughed. "That's the most human thing you've ever said." "Perhaps humanity is contagious," she replied, allowing herself a small smile. "Like love, like hope, like the future itself." The blast doors began to glow as Centaurian cutting tools engaged. But Lyra wasn't afraid. She had science on her side. She had truth on her side. Most importantly, she had humanity on her side. And if there was one thing she'd learned in her time among them, it was that humans had a remarkable habit of making the impossible possible. "Ready?" Marcus asked as the doors began to yield. "Together," she replied, her scales shimmering with all the colors of dawn. The doors opened to a future neither species had imagined possible. But then again, that was rather the point. New horizons. The quantum delivery room hummed with energy as Lyra's scales cycled through colors never before seen in Centaurian biology. Around her, human and alien medical staff worked in perfect synchronization, their differences forgotten in the face of the miracle they were about to witness. "The quantum field is stabilizing," Sarah announced, her eyes fixed on readings that would rewrite every xenobiology textbook in existence. "It's like the baby is creating its own perfect environment for emergence." Marcus hadn't left Lyra's side for hours, his hand steady in hers despite the occasional electrical discharge from her overwhelmed neural networks. "Just like its mother," he said softly, making the impossible look easy. "Nothing about this has been easy," Lyra managed through gritted teeth, but her scales flickered with affection. The past month had been a whirlwind of revelation and change. Their broadcast had done more than expose the truth. It had sparked a revolution. Thousands of hidden human-alien couples had come forward. Centuries of suppressed research had surfaced. The Centaurian Council had fractured, with younger members openly challenging the old guard's doctrine of genetic purity. And through it all, Earth had stood firm, protecting not just Lyra and Marcus, but the very idea they represented. Another contraction hit, this one accompanied by a pulse of quantum energy that made every instrument in the room spike. "It's time," Sarah announced. "Lyra, your body is naturally creating a quantum bubble, just like the one that brought us together," Marcus finished. "Nature copying art." "Science copying love," Lyra corrected, surprising herself. When had she become so comfortable with human concepts of emotion? The room filled with a golden light as the quantum field intensified. Lyra felt her consciousness expanding, touching everyone present. For a moment, all barriers fell away: species, biology, belief. They were all connected in the quantum dance of creation. Then, with a final surge of energy that would be detected as far away as Centauri Prime, that child entered the universe. "Oh," Sarah breathed, her scientific detachment cracking. "Oh, she's perfect." The baby girl had Lyra's iridescent scales, but they shifted with human warmth rather than Centaurian rigidity. Her eyes were Marcus's deep brown, but with the silver pupils of her mother's people. Most remarkably, she generated a constant, stable quantum field that seemed to harmonize with everything around her. "Hello, Aurora," Lyra whispered, using the human name they'd chosen together. The child's scales rippled in response, displaying colors that spoke of infinite possibility. "Her quantum signature," Sarah reported, her voice thick with emotion. "It's not just stable, it's perfect. The exact frequency needed to bridge human and Centaurian biology. Almost like she was meant to exist," Marcus finished, gently touching his daughter's cheek. "Like we all were." The door slid open, admitting Director Chen and a holographic projection that made Lyra's scales flash in surprise. Kilar, first speaker of the Centaurian Council, observed the scene with unreadable crystalline features. "The readings have been confirmed," he announced formally. "The child's quantum signature matches ancient prophecies of the bridge." The bridge. Marcus looked between Kilar and Lyra, who had gone very still. "A myth," she said softly. "A legend of a being who would unite all spacefaring races through love rather than diplomacy. We were taught it was metaphorical." "As were we all." Kilar's form flickered, but the evidence cannot be denied. The quantum resonance, the genetic stability, the way she naturally connects different species. The Council has voted. All charges are dropped. More than that, he seemed to struggle with the words, "we ask for forgiveness." Lyra felt tears form in her inner eyelids, another human trait she'd acquired. There's nothing to forgive. We all believed what we were taught. Until love taught us something new, Marcus added, making Kalar actually chuckle. Perhaps, the first speaker admitted, it is time we learned from our human allies. Their capacity for evolution, emotional and biological, is remarkable. Aurora chose that moment to demonstrate her own remarkable qualities, her quantum field expanding to envelop everyone present. For a brief, beautiful moment, they all felt what she naturally was, a bridge between worlds, a promise of unity, the living embodiment of love transcending every barrier. Well, Sarah said, wiping her eyes, I think that's her vote on the matter. The room filled with laughter, human, centaurian, and everything in between. As Lyra held her daughter, watching her scales shift with colors that told stories of hope and possibility, she reflected on her journey. From a proud diplomat who would never date a human, to a mother whose love had helped change the course of 2 civilizations. What are you thinking? Marcus asked softly. That I was right, she replied, making him raise an eyebrow. I will never date a human, she smiled as his face fell slightly, because I'm going to marry one instead. Aurora's scales flickered with joy as her parents kissed, their own quantum fields merging with hers. Outside, the sun rose over Earth, its light refracting through the quantum bubble that still surrounded them, creating a rainbow that contained colors no single species had ever seen before. But together, they saw them all. And that, perhaps, was the greatest miracle of all.